If you want to learn how to sculpt demon wings inside ZBrush for 3D printing, toy design, or even animation, hey, my name is Wasim, and some of you might know me as Pixel Buddha. Today, I'm going to show you how to create demon wings or bat wings inside of ZBrush. Now, this is the technique that I usually use for my own toy design and for client work. I'm going to keep them simple. We're going to work with basic shapes and before we can merge so we can have the ability to edit. So without further ado, let's jump into ZBrush. As always, we're going to start with our trusty sphere. And for this one, we're going to be using a similar method to what I've showed in the Mickey Hands tutorial. So we'll press B and we go to IMM primitive. And then here we're going to use the low polysphere. And you'll notice that I have symmetry on. And you can go ahead and drag this and just move this on. Then I'll go B and V. And we have the move tool selection. And I'll go and just give this a shape. And I'm going to go to subtool, split, and split unmasked points. So this way I'll have this sphere separate and the main sphere on its own subtool. All right, now go back to B and go IMM primitives, this one. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag. But for this one, I don't need symmetry, so I'm going to go and do not symmetrical, and I'm going to show you why in a second. If I do symmetry and then I go and start scaling, you'll see it's going to scale to the center. So I don't want that. I want this to scale to that point. So here's the difference. If I symmetry off and then I'll drag. So now if I scale, see the sphere scales down to the touch point that I started with. Okay, so I'll start with that one. And here, what I wanted you to do is I want you to go into B and go into something called Z Modeler. And there go B, Z Modeler. And turn polygroup on. And what I want you to do by default, I'm not going to go into any settings, just go over to the middle edge and then just while holding Alt press, and that will delete the edge. Now I'll go ahead and split unmasked, and then I'll go to this one. Now I want to mask this part so I can drag it off. So I can, if you do that by default, it's going to give you a square, but I don't want a square. I want to use the lasso. So while holding Control, here, go to Brush and just select, mask lasso. All right. So now if I go here and drag, and then click, hold Control and click, and then I can drag this out. So now I have a clean shape. Now, the only thing that I don't like now is if I start rotating this, it's going to rotate from here, but I really want this to rotate from its starting point. So hold Alt and just drag the arrow on the Z axis, which is the blue one. Okay, just so we can take the gizmo back to its origin. All right, so now I could go in and I can start rotating this in its position. And if you've seen the Mickey Hands tutorial, what I'm doing now is I'm just figuring out the main shapes. I'm not worried about detail. I'm not worried about making it perfect. I'm just trying to find the anatomy of a bat wing. Now I'll go back to B. I'm in primitive. Select the polysphere. I want to drag this here, and then get this into place. I'm not gonna go ahead and split this one. I'm gonna keep it like this, and then the same polysphere, I want to drag it here. Now you can go ahead and duplicate that one and just move it around, but we're just going to repeat this just so we can make it easier for you guys. So go B, Z, select Z modeler, and while holding Alt, go over the middle edge and just click, and it's just going to delete it, right? So now, again, Control, I'm going to drag over that part, sorry, and then reverse mask, and I'm just going to drag that out. And again, for this one, I want the gizmo to go back, hold Alt, and drag the gizmo back. Now, to remove the mask, just go Control and just drag outside, and it should be fine. Now, again, if you want to isolate this, just click on it, and then go to, while holding Control, and then split and mask point. So now I have it separate. The only thing you'll notice that this, now we have our gizmo a bit off. So how do I fix this? And it might happen. So what I want you to do is I want you to isolate this solo, and then while holding Alt, and on this point, just drag the lasso, and this is gonna reset it back, okay? Now, just get this into its place. On the other screen, I'm looking at the shapes of the bat wing. All right, now I want to select this again, and then, so I masked it, and I'm just only moving that part. So now, because we moved the gizmo, hold Alt and bring it back to that point. You don't need to do this, but it just makes it easier when we go back and you want to modify. Let's say the wing is too long and so on. Again, do this again. B, polysphere. I'm just going to drag this in here, and I'll do split unmasked. Then I'm going to select this polysphere, and for this one, I'm going to do the same thing. So drag, I'll do split as masked points, and go B, Z, select Z modeler, and while holding Alt, click and delete that edge. Okay, so what I want now is I want to make another section and drag the gizmo back, and I'm going to scale this because I want it to be a bit smaller. And I'm not going to worry about masking because I want this to have a different shape. Just go ahead and scale it in the Z. Doesn't matter if it just elongates the shape a bit. It's what we're going for anyhow. Okay, so now we can do the other thing we can do. We can duplicate this and just drag this here and then pose it into place. As I've told you in the previous tutorial as well, there isn't one perfect way to do anything. It's like there's the method that works for you. It's the best method. So now what I'm doing, I want this to taper off. So I'm going to select the top, reverse masking, and just scale this down. You see how it gives us that, and then I'm going to scale it out. Just gonna, because I want that bony finger kind of look. Okay, so maybe just move this a bit back, and this here. Again, we can always go back and pose this. So because we have these, what we can do is we can go ahead and merge these two. So I'm going to go ahead and merge down. Okay, so it's going to merge these two, and I merged these two because I want the gizmo to be here, so it's easier when we duplicate. So what I'll do now is I'll go duplicate, and I'll just drag this and just move it a bit down, and pose it like that. And maybe I'll need this to be a bit different. Now, if I click on it, you see it's still gonna select the same thing because these two have the same polygroup. So now if I go to polygroups and do auto groups, now these two have different groups. Before I do any tweaks, I just make these a bit tinier. So I'll make them a bit smaller, and then control click on that one. Just move the gizmo while holding Alt, and then just pose this just a bit. Again, don't worry if it's not perfect. This is why we're keeping everything separate. Now I want the gizmo to go back. Again, as I showed you before, go solo. While holding Alt, just drag on that point. And it helps when everything is low poly, it doesn't have too many faces. It helps to know to keep things really clean and just worry about the main shapes and not about the details. And now I duplicated that and I'm moving that into position. That's the bone structure of our wing. As I said, now because we have these separate, we can go ahead and tweak this until we're happy with the shape. All right, now that we have the main shapes created, I can go ahead and just move some stuff around before we add all these stuff in one folder, and we can start merging. All right, let's give this this body more of a bird shape. Let's make it a bit more interesting. And select this one and go new folder, and then I can go ahead and drag all these into under that folder. So now before I go ahead and merge these, what I want to do is I want to select the first one and just go into geometry, dynamic subdivision, and just click dynamic subdivision and do the same for all the others. So what I'm selecting Alt and clicking on the subtool. So this way I don't have to go subtool, select the tool, and then go back to geometry and do dynamic subdivision. I can do that while having dynamic geometry subtool controls open. Okay. So now that we have that, maybe let's select this one and maybe do a bit of an inflate. Inflate and go BMV and just move it around. Okay, once we're happy with the shape, we can go ahead and on this gear icon go click Boolean with subdivision. So what it's going to do is going to Boolean everything with the dynamic subdivision that we added. Now I want to solo this. So now if we look at this, you'll see it still has the poly group. So if you want to make changes, you can make them now, or before we do a ZRemesh, or when we do a ZRemesh, which if I leave it here so we can see what happens, I'm just gonna leave everything by default and just click ZRemesh. It's just gonna go ahead and create a more clean polygon shape for us. But before we do that, we can do keep groups. So what it's going to do is going to do the ZRemeshing while keeping the groups that we had. So this way, if I want to go in and do any changes by holding Control and clicking, I can mask that area and I can move the gizmo around and make any edits. Now, you'll notice when you do edits and it's masked, you see the mask is harsh, but if you hold Control and you click, it just softens it, so you can do softer edits to the shape. So now if I turn off polygroups and I'll go to Dynamesh and do dynamic subdivision and do dynamic, this is how it looks. So this is the main skeleton of that. It's going to hold the wing. Now for the wing, I'm going to use the simplest way to do it, which is append. And I'm just going to go ahead and append the plane 3D. Just remove solo. And I'm just going to move that here. And now I'm going to rotate it in place and scale it just so it encapsulates all the, if I turn transparency, just to make sure it has all the pieces in. Now, if you rotate, you'll see the plane is not visible anymore. And that because this is just one plane which has visibility faces only one side. So to fix that, you'll go to display properties and do double. And now you'll see, you can see it either way. So this doesn't have any thickness to it. So it's just one face. And usually any shapes, any meshes with no thickness, it will only, by default, it will show only the one face and not the other. And you can do flip, and what it's going to do is going to flip the face but we want double just so we can see what we're doing from each side. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want to go ahead and move this just so it covers our the wings. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we just want to block the shape in so we can mask it and extract the shape that we're looking for. So I'm just going in, just rotating and moving this shape around. And something like this is pretty good. Just make sure you cover all the mesh, but don't worry if you don't. Okay, now I'm not going to do dynamic subdivision for this one. I want to do Control D again, and if you go to geometry, this added 3 subdivisions, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can actually go back to the old subdivision, but I can, if I go to the higher one and go delete lower, you'll see what it did for us. It created extra polygons so we can work with. And I've done that because I want to go ahead and mask a shape. So I'm going to go and have transparency on. And while holding Control, you can do this with the lasso. And maybe do something like that, similar to our reference. And now if I go ahead and solo, this is what we have. But I would like to tweak this so we can hold Control Alt, maybe cut this out of it. And then I'll go back to the old one, the mask brush. I want to solo this, and I want to just add a bit of a rounder shape. And I want this to go to the edge, and I'll show you in a second. Doesn't matter if we're adding extra. All right, now while we have the mask on, I'm just going to go and do Control W, and now it created a new. And I want you to go ahead and click Control or hold Control Alt and click on it, and then under Subtool and go Split Hidden. Okay, I don't need this, so I can go ahead and delete it. Now this looks like a big mess, so let's go ahead and clean this. So what I want to go under deformation, and I can go ahead and start to polish these by feature. So it's gonna polish all the edges so we don't have all these harsh edges. Okay, but what I want is I actually want to keep these corners. I don't want them to soften up. So what you can do is you can go in and you can actually mask the points that you don't want the deformation to have effect on. So I'm just going to mask a couple. I'm going to mask this, and I'm going to mask that, and I can do polish by feature now, and it's going to keep. Now, if this is not enough, you'll notice that there is like a small dot here. If you click on it, it's going to turn into a circle. So now it's going to affect the edges as well strongly. And because we added those masks, it's not affecting those. So we can still have the shape that we saved. So now we go back to B and V, and we'll start moving the shape. Just make sure you have the mask off by Control and just dragging over the all right. So let's go ahead and just move these. And make sure you look at it from the back as well to make sure it's like what do you want it? You want like half of the mesh to be visible from this side and half to be visible from that side, because we're going to go ahead and add a bit of thickness to it anyhow. All right, so once you're happy with the shape, I've just went ahead and cleaned it up a bit. And you can actually add a bit of deformation a bit of polish by feature. So you can solo this, and if you do, let's remove the mask. Now with the mask, it just holds that edge. So polish by feature. If I remove the mask and I do polish by feature, it's going to give me, the more I add, the softer it's going to look. So if you're going for a more softer look, maybe a cartoony character or something like that, you can definitely do that. So I'm going to go just undo that. And now let's go ahead and add a bit of a thickness to this. Now, even if you're doing animation or you're doing 3D printing like I do for toys, you still need to add a bit of a thickness. So to add thickness, I'll just go ahead under geometry, and what I want you to do is on the panel loop, go loops, set it to 1, thickness 0.5. I think it's by default is 0.1. Polish, I don't need polish, no bevel, and you can leave the elevation 100% or minus 100. If we do 100%, if we do panel loop, it's just gonna extrude this way, and if we do minus 100, it's just gonna extrude that way. It really depends where you added the plane initially, so it doesn't have any huge effect. So just gonna move this in. Now if I go ahead and do dynamic subdivision, you'll see that will give us a nice soft edge. Now when you're doing 3D printing, just make sure you add a lot of thickness. Like make sure you have at least, I don't know, 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters even, just to make sure it's easier when the piece needs to be printed either on FDM or an SLA printer. So now it's just about going in and tweaking the shapes a bit more. Maybe you want this to have more of a bit more inflated on the bottom, as if wind is hitting the wings. Let's work on the skeleton to make sure it doesn't look like a bunch of cylinders and spheres. So to do that, I want to go in and under dynamic subdivision, if we remove dynamic subdivision, this is what we have now. And if you go B, clay buildup, C, B, and I go ahead and add some, it's not going to add as much detail because it doesn't have too many polygons to work with. So if you see, if I have Dynamesh on, I can see those better. So what I want to do now, before I go ahead and apply the dynamic subdivision, I just want to fill this as if like it has a bit of meat on top. So maybe for this one I'm going to do inflate, and maybe for this as well. So what I'm just doing, I'm just going in and just adding some clay buildup. So it doesn't look too clean, too perfect. Okay. So once you're happy with that, we can go in and do apply, and then under Dynamesh, I want to just do a default, see how that, and I think that's more than enough. I can go in and I can soften with the shift, and I can add more, soften again. The Dynamesh just flushes shapes out a bit, and just by merging all of them, they look a bit more natural. And maybe with the clay buildup, add a bit of detail like that and just soften it up back. Just so it looks like there is bones and we have a bit of meat or skin on top. Make sure you do that to the back as well. Just breaking up the surface so it doesn't look too perfect. So just going clay build up and then soften it, clay build up and soften it. The messier it is, the better it's going to look, and the more natural it's going to look. So buildup. And maybe an edge here, soften it, edge here, and again, soften it. If you hold Alt, actually you can cut out, so I'll make them smaller, and I can sculpt in. Okay, so I'm gonna go maybe B, M, V, and just select the move. You can go ahead and maybe move some stuff around. So it depends on the look that you're going for. Maybe if you want these to go out of the wings, or just keep them in. I think they look a bit more interesting like that. More like demon wings. Alright. So now that we have the wings selected, I can go ahead and do the same thing that we did for these guys. Go under dynamic subdivision. Just gonna make sure it has a bit more subdivision. So instead of 2, just gonna go to 4 and just do apply. And then under geometry, dynamesh, see if default is enough. What I want to do is maybe I'll go ahead and have like the wings have been through battle, stuff like that. So what I'll do, go back to mask, hold control, and then select lasso, and then just do a shape like this, and just do Control W, and then hold Control and Shift and click on it, and then Control Shift and just drag to flip that selection. And under modify topology, go delete hidden. So now it deleted the extra part that we added. Now if I go ahead and hold Control and just drag, it's just going to dynamesh it again, and it's going to give us that shape. So we can go ahead and just tweak that a bit. And we can go ahead and add a couple more if we want. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to go B, inflate, and under the alpha, I want to go ahead and select this alpha. And if I go ahead and drag now, I can add a bit of like skin detail. Or I can undo that. And instead of dots, I'm going to go ahead and select drag rectangle. And what it does is going to use this alpha, and we can actually drag it on top of the mesh, and it's just going to add that detail. If we add it tiny, just drag it small, it's going to add it small. If we drag, we can add like big, maybe big vines or detail like that. Okay. And for the other one, let's go to alpha, and I'm going to select, where is it? Alpha 22. And this is going to give us some nice, more like vines. Just to break that shape so it doesn't look too flat, and it looks a bit more natural. Now that we're happy with our model, we can go ahead and mirror the wing to the other side. So we can do that in a couple of ways. You can go ahead and duplicate the subtool, and then go under deformation, and you can do mirror in the X. Now, if you worked on your model in a different axis, you can, maybe X might not work. Maybe you'll need to turn it on in Y or Z. Usually it's either X or Z. Now to do the same for the other one, you can select this wing and do the same thing. Go duplicate, and under deformation, there you go, and do mirror. Or if I go ahead and undo that, and I'm gonna go ahead and delete this, you can select the wing, and under Z plugin, there is Subtool Master, and you have Mirror, and it's gonna ask you when we create the mirror option, what do you want to do? Do you want to append it as a new subtool, like it's going to duplicate it for you, or you want to merge it into this subtool, and on which axis do you want to mirror this? And I want it in the same subtool, and so it just saves us a couple of steps of duplicating and mirroring. Okay, so now that we have this, I want to go ahead and merge these. So merge down, okay, and merge down. So now we can go ahead and add this to a character. So I have a character already that I've worked on a couple of years ago, and is this fella, and we'll go ahead and add a couple of wings for him. So we'll do that by, under the subtool, go append and select the PM3D plane. And this is why I say naming subtools is really important, because now with this project it's simple because you don't have many subtools, but when you're working on something a bit complex, so we'll name this wings, you'll have a lot of subtools and you won't know which ones you need to select. So go ahead and select wings, and these are way too big, so I'm gonna select them, hold Alt and click on the arrow, and then Alt on the other one, on the Google Map spin. And now while holding Shift, I can rotate this and snap it, and maybe scale these down a bit and move it up, maybe too big still. Now if I want to pose these, I'm gonna go ahead and turn symmetry on, and then I'm gonna move these so I can move them separate. Maybe rotate them in place, maybe something like this. Can maybe pose them like that. All right. Now I went ahead and created a couple of different ones, and you can actually download these from the link below. Now you can go ahead, after you add it to your character, you might need to make a bit of adjustments, like moving some stuff around, just so it makes it fit the look that you're going for. All right. I really hope you found it helpful, and if you have any questions, please let me know. All right. See you in the next one.
Васенька, отмей.